are you okay with everything? Are you happy to start then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just remember, you decide where we do and we don't talk about in all of this, and if you can move us on at any point, and back. I've got a short cue introduction to start us off with, though. It's a sad fact that if you're bereaved by suicide, then you become at an increased risk of dying by suicide yourself. Karen Sykes' husband Ian died in October 2015. Then in 2019, the unimaginable happened when her daughter Beth also died by suicide. As Karen emerged from the turmoil of being both a bereaved widow and mum, she started a local quilting group called Speak Their Name. That quilting group, along with others around the country, has now developed into a website where loved ones can be remembered through words, images and videos on their own square. Both Ian and Beth are remembered online, and I'll talk to Karen about the website shortly. I'm Dan Holland, and just before we hear from Karen, a reminder that speaking of suicide does cover some pretty difficult territory. If you need help and support, or listening to this is too much, please press pause and get in touch with Mikey's line. You'll find all their details in the show notes. Karen, thank you for joining us on Speaking of Suicide. Both Ian and Beth are really important individually in this podcast, and I think we need to treat them as such. So do you mind if we go back to the beginning and start with Ian first of all? I've read you described him as an earth angel. What was he like? Introduce him to us.
Ian was... I don't think you can find words to describe somebody like Ian that would give him enough, would actually be able to, you'd be able to imagine who he was and what he was. He, to me, was just my best friend. He was super intelligent, and I know we talk about people and we remember things, but these are facts. He was a super intelligent man, so much so that he would go out of his way to research and really look into anything that he was going to do, whether it was a DIY project, whether it was helping me with my master's dissertation. He wouldn't just give it a brief or just overlook something and just look at what the essentials. He would go into the minutiae of depth so that he was informed and could make the correct decisions and advise. He was a committed and devoted father. That was his. When I met him, that was his. I think his email was "Dad's the word" at whatever his platform was, and that was him. He was. It was the best job in the world for him being a dad. We met, and we both had got our own children from previous relationships, but we met and it was brilliant. It was like what you read or what you see in movies. Or I met my soulmate. He was my best friend. He was my confidant. He never judged me. No relationship's ever perfect. And we did have, I'm quite fiery. But he was just my world. And I felt very, very, and I still do, very fortunate that I was loved and experienced that love of somebody so special. He was a typical Yorkshire man. He was fun, very, very talkative, and I used to say to him, "You need to listen to people because you just talk." He was loud and vibrant, and yeah, he was a force to be reckoned with. But as I say, he was an earth angel. He gave more than he took, and he would always look at the other the other side to things, and he had that quality of his generosity of not just around material things, and he was brilliant at buying, but really listening to people. And what he bought me a birthday present once, and my mum said, you need to be really careful what you say, because he listens. And he bought me a wakeboarding, and it was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I just was hitting the cold water in the Goa Peninsula. He had a really good time, but but it's things like that. He listened, and he cared, and his actions spoke volumes for everybody. And when I say generous, he was generous with his time. Nothing. He would always make time for others.
How it sounds like, given you were saying how proud he was of being a dad, I'm assuming he and your children got on really well and they were close?
Yeah, Ian had 3 boys, and I'm a mother to girls, so boys are different. Well, we all know boys and girls are very different, and daughters can be quite, how can I put it, with the fathers. Ian was the father figure. They didn't have that man in their life, and he was the dad. He came into life later on, but they absolutely loved him and valued everything he did for them as a dad, and he would do anything. We drove to Paris to see my middle daughter. We took her to Paris when she moved into the university there. He was as loving and caring to my children as he was to his own, and he saw them as his daughters.
Was he the sort of man to talk about his mental health or ask other people for help at all? He sounds like he was very independent and very driven.
He did speak to me about some years ago whether he'd felt really low with his mental health, and he'd sought help at that point in his life. And he did seek help. He contacted, I think it was Samaritans, and he sought help around how he was feeling, and that was really positive experience for him, because he went on and then we met, and things were very positive for him. But no, he was quite proud, I think, and he would not openly talk to me about his mental health. We talk about his feelings, but to me, I don't think we had the conversations of what he was really feeling. I think he saw his role as a husband, father, and a protector.
Can you describe, Karen, the impact that Ian's death in October 2015 had on you? Because losing anyone is difficult. Losing someone by suicide, I can't imagine it. I've not experienced it. But to lose someone when you don't feel there are signs or things that you've talked about or might be aware of, what impact did it have on you all?
I think the shock and the complete and utter where it threw me, that the day that Ian died, I just felt like the day was horrendous in that I couldn't actually articulate what was happening, and that shock and the fact that this man, this human being I loved so much, had just completely was no longer with us, and dying to suicide. I think it was absorbing the shock of everybody else on me. I felt like it was being transferred onto me, their shock and the fact that people couldn't believe it as they were trying to get their heads around the fact that Ian had died, but the fact that he died to suicide just was, for me, really overwhelming. I felt that it was just getting bigger and bigger, the pressure on me, that I felt that I didn't have the answers, and I felt that people were looking at me for the answers, and I couldn't provide that. You look in yourself as a human being, what ifs, and did I miss something? Did I say something? We'd been together as a family. We'd had a little takeaway and some celebration. It was a lovely, lovely evening. But the day after, that had all gone, and my life was just. I just didn't know what was happening to me, and I think as the days and weeks went on, that trauma of it all was so overwhelming that it had such a massive impact on me and the children and all our family and friends. I lost my dad, and I've lost really beloved people in my life, but this was, and I guess it was the complexity of the level of grief and the emotions of, like I say, of blame and what ifs. It goes around in your head, and it's as though you need the answers to that, and yet nobody's going to give you the answers to that. The fact that Ian felt that we would be better off without him, he felt that our lives were better, and that to think that is your option, it's heartbreaking.
How did you support both sets of children, your children and Ian's children, while you were dealing with your own grief?
I think I was a bit more, I was like the Tasmanian devil. I just started doing practical things and trying to look at what needed to be done, things that there's always because there's processes in everything in life, after death, after the birth of the child, after, we've got to follow a process, and also when it's a sudden death, you're subject to the involvement of other professionals and individuals. So I tried to cushion that from the children, even though they were all, young adults. I still felt that they needed that protection, and I think I just carried on and tried to be there for them, but I think we were all just doing our own thing in our own worlds. We were functioning, but actually, I think when I look at it, we all, at the end of the day, everybody would disappear into their own rooms, and we were all pretty isolated, I think, in our grief, even though at the time I thought we were together. Probably looking back now, over the years, I don't think we were. When you're in such trauma, and it is trauma, this is a traumatic event, and that trauma is going to have an impact on you as an individual, then as your role, say, as a mother, a wife, as the person that is seen to arrange the funeral, continue to make the meals, continue to support, you lose a bit more of yourself. And I look back now and I feel that I think I was trying to brush things away and just felt that I had to get on with it. And it's hard, it is difficult to talk about, but I think as a coping mechanism, I thought that was probably the best thing at the time, when really, and looking back now, I think, if I had had more of the capacity to reflect and to potentially have conversations, or be supported to have conversations with my children, it probably would have helped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've been through this many, many times, Karen, and I'm sure people have probably said to you, I suspect, not to be hard on yourself, because you're dealing with all your own grief, aren't you? And loss, and it must be incredibly hard as a parent to deal with all of that. We mentioned Beth earlier on in our conversation. Yeah. What sort of young lady was Beth?
I've got three daughters, and Beth was the youngest. She entered the world very dramatically, on Easter Monday in 1993. She wasn't expected to arrive for another month, but she made her entrance very dramatically, and that was the start of things to come. Beth was a real mummy's girl. She was the baby of the family. She was spoilt. She was indulged. She was rescued by her sisters and by her mother in any shape and form. If a car broke down, even if I was out of the country, she would ring me to tell me to be quite dramatic about it. And I'm stuck in Sheffield near a motorway, and I'm going, well, what can I do? I'm in America. What do you want me to do? But she was somebody that wore a heart on her sleeve. She was kind. She was a typical young woman who was beautiful, vibrant, very intelligent, very, very compassionate. She absolutely loved her job. She was an occupational therapist working with elderly patients, and she loved it. And I used to say to her, why the elderly, Beth? What about a lot of OTs work with, learning disabilities, children? And she went, Mum, there's nobody more interesting than an older person that has gone through so much, that their life experience. She said, I learn every day. And she just used to say, it's fascinating. And she just adored her patients, their families, and the work she did. She also liked her false eyelashes and her makeup and her friends. She wore a heart on her sleeve, did Bethany. But also it was a failing for her because she did talk about how she felt. She did trust too much, probably, and give too much. And some people can't deal with that. But she was a real... She'd love the fact that we were talking about her. She'd love the fact that her picture's been on websites, and whereas Ian probably would be like a bit more, no, she'd love that. She was my best friend. My world at the moment, Beth rang me and texted me persistently and constantly. We had a continual communication. If I ignored her, she would get angry. Even if at work, she'd text me going, why haven't you answered my text? And it was like this need to have this constant connection with me, even if we were apart. So now the fact my world is a lot quieter and less dramatic. It's got to be said, very less dramatic. I don't have the furore of drama that Beth brought with her, which she did. And it was draining, I've got to say. But also, that was part of her, and that was how she was with me and our life.
Was she and Ian close?
Extremely close. She fed into everything that Ian needed, in that how can I say it? She would be quite charming and, I don't want to say manipulative, but dads and daughters can, he loved having a daughter. It was like she needed him. She needed him to take her to work, or and he needed that. So they had this extremely strong bond. They absolutely adored one another. They were silly together. But yeah, he was the most positive male figure in her life.
You said that she wore a heart on her sleeve, and she talked about her mental health. Did she ever talk to you, Karen, about the impact of Ian's death on her at all?
She did. It's difficult, because when I look back, we did have conversations, and Beth struggled, completely and utterly struggled after Ian's death. Beth's mental health was always quite fragile. As a child, her anxiety, she'd had counselling, and she'd been involved with services when she was a teenager. And I thought we did talk, and I thought I listened. And I know you said before, Dan, about being hard on yourself, but it's only when you think back, and now with, I don't know, I think more myself having more awareness about speaking to people that have been bereaved of suicide and talking about it, makes you realise that you can ask questions that I would never have asked Beth. I didn't ask her, did she ever feel that if she was suicidal? I never asked her if she wanted to harm herself. I presumed that our relationship was strong enough and the love was a safety net.
That she would feel strong enough to come to you and talk about it?
Yes, definitely. Because I think I was comforted by the fact that she couldn't leave me, that she needed me as much as I needed her.
Do you want to pause?
No, you're all right.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
Are you all right? Okay.
Yeah.
We know that a suicide in the family increases the risk for other family members. Do you think now that Beth's decision to take her life was directly related to the loss she was feeling of Ian?
Yes, sadly I do. And I'm a nurse of nearly 40 years, and I didn't realise that after Ian's death that both myself and our children, Beth and all the children, were at higher risk of dying suicide. That never actually entered my head. And I didn't know the fact. And it was only when Beth died, it was only after Beth died that I became aware of this. And to me, it's such a significant fact, and you can see why it is.
Let's just take a pause for a second. Let's pause,
Yeah.
Karen. Because if anyone's listening to Karen and you or someone you know needs some help right now, you can text Mikey's line on 077 86 20 7755, or you can contact them on Messenger, web chat and WhatsApp. And the number for WhatsApp is 01463 729 000. After Beth's death, Karen, how did the impact of all of this trauma, unimaginable trauma, I'll be perfectly honest, for me, how did that manifest itself in you? Were you frightened at all for yourself at any point?
I've got to be honest. I've struggled with my grief. I still do, and I think it's by being open and honest that you can say that. I think after Ian died, I think I put a smile on. I was performing at work. I outwardly to everybody, everything was fine. It was perfect. Well, not perfect, but that's ridiculous, really. It was. I was recovering, and that fits with our society in that it's people that the outpouring of support and love and the love around you when somebody dies is massive. But everybody's got busy lives. People carry on, and our society, there is a time scale. I still feel that there's a time scale and there's a patience with you, and that will then go over a certain amount of time. When you're bereaved of suicide, that's never going to go. How we manage ourselves and our grief, we learn. But I think how you learn is, I think it's what you get out there and what support you get from other people. After Ian's death, I ignored what was really happening to me and the trauma that I'd gone through, and it was only when it was Beth that was saying to me, Mum, you might be going to work, you might be coming home, you might be making a tea, she said, but you're not well. And it was only with her pushing me that I actually thought I wasn't. And I joined a group, a widowed and young charity, which was, I was with people with lived experience, and I was in a safe place. That support really helped me. It was remotely, we did do meetups and stuff like that, but it was invaluable, and that was so crucial to me, and it really helped. On reflection, none of the children got any support like that, or they didn't have that. So I think I presumed that they were all okay. Beth did get some counselling through work and some support through our work, her workplace, which was helpful to her. But I think her grief, she couldn't navigate it. She couldn't. The overwhelming blackness and trauma that she was going through was constant, I believe. That again, she thought that the only option she had was death and to be with Ian.
When you went to the support groups and spoke with people who were also bereaved, how much of a difference did that start to make to you? A big smile has just appeared on your face, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think it's so lonely, and you feel not just the loneliness, but you just don't know if what you're experiencing is not normal, but if it's what other people feel, or is it just you? But to be with people that you felt you could say what you were feeling and what was going through your head and what you were doing. You know, and the people, the judgment wasn't there. There was no judgment. It was safe. You were with people who just got it and just gave you that reality that this is okay to feel like this, and that permission to be sad if you want to be sad, but also that permission to laugh as well, and to have good days and to enjoy life as well. It was just made such a big difference.
And is this how the Speak Their Name quilts came about? How did the quilting all start?
It did really, because I'd got all that support, like I say, from Widowed and Young, the charity. But when Beth died, I really struggled. I couldn't... Again, I started being like a Tasmanian devil, and I think I was on social media, and I think I was like reaching out. I was going to anyone and anywhere that I thought that they could provide me, because to me this grief was completely different than losing my husband. Even though they'd both died to suicide, this was my daughter.
Can you describe the difference that you felt there between losing your husband and losing your daughter?
I feel, and it's not to, I don't want to say top trumps, or there's no top trump, there's no
of course not.
About grief.
Of course not.
But I think losing Ian was so much different to losing Beth, in the fact that I felt part of me had died with Beth. She was part of me. I gave birth to her. She was part of me. And that, as a mum, is pretty unthinkable. So yeah, I think it is very, very different. And I think that the overwhelming difference combined again with the trauma and the shock, but also combined with, again, the questions around suicide, and as a mum, did you not notice things? And you, again, the blame and the what ifs and the questions we all, as somebody that is bereaved to suicide, you put on yourself, that you question what you could have done practically to save that person. And I think, like I say, Dan, the grief is so complex. But given the fact that, like I say, it was my youngest daughter, and I just felt that this couldn't be happening. Like I say, I think that, like you say about the quilt, so I reached out everywhere. Unfortunately, everybody criticises social media sometimes, but there are positives around it.
Yeah.
And I made some very, very strong connections with a number of mothers that have been bereaved to suicide, and some dads as well. But and these mums, we used to, I think we called ourselves warrior mums. We all had different stories. Our children were of different ages, but the connection again was massive. It enabled me to feel that I wasn't alone, that I could say that, you know, things that I wouldn't be able to say to like my mum or my other daughters, for fear that they would be worried about me, or that they would think that I was at risk of taking my own life. But I could talk to other people, and that to me, it's essential. The fact that you feel that you've got somebody that will listen to you no matter where or who, and gets it, and that will offer you that support, or just will listen to you without that judgment, is massive. So we had this connection and friendship, and again, it's friends are all of us are all across the country. We have met up, we've had workshops, we had knitting workshops where we all learnt to knit a sock, and there was a lot of laughter and fun. But on the back of that, one of the mums, Rebecca Jackson, was commissioned. She's a very creative person too, and was working with Adele Owen in Greater Manchester, and they Greater Manchester commissioned Rebecca to create the Greater Manchester Speak Their Name quilt. And because I'm, as you might tell, I'm from the Greater Manchester area, from Bolton, I was able to, Beth had been born in Bolton, so she was eligible to have a square on there. And also sadly eligible to have a square was Ellen Scott, Anna Scott's daughter, and myself. And Anna lives in Yorkshire and from Yorkshire, but Ellen studied over in Manchester and was at university. So again, we made this connection. And I think there was this vision, and you know, you always have aspirations when things happen, and the quilt was awe-inspiring. It's beautiful, and again, it's not. It just shows how individually we're all so different, but it connected people. So me and Anna and Pat Sower, another mum who lost her son Dom, decided we'll do this in Yorkshire. And you have these brilliant ideas, and it was massive. It grew legs, as they say. We weren't commissioned, so we had to get money to do it, and we worked with partners across the region of Yorkshire. We worked with groups like SOBS. If it wasn't for voluntary organisations and our public health and professionals and services, the wellbeing colleges and things like that, we wouldn't have got where we got, and we were so grateful for that, and it enabled us to have workshops. But like I said, going back to what I said before and what the questions around support, the workshops were fascinating for me, because we'd have these workshops and people would come and you'd think, oh, they're going to know what they're going to do with a square, or they're going to, you know, ask about embroidery techniques, or they're going to ask about how to do this design or that. They didn't. Not in the main. People just felt safe, so they talked about their loved ones. Some people had not spoken about somebody they'd lost for years and years, but they felt they'd been given this unique opportunity to come somewhere. And they just said as soon as they walked in the room or they sat down, they felt they could just be open, and it was safe to talk and share memories, to cry like we all do at times, but also to laugh and to say what they wanted to do with the square. And then I remember one lady contacting me via email. I did meet this lady eventually, but she contacted me about her mum, and she said, my mum wants to make a square for my brother who died, I think it must be 50 years ago, as a young man. Her mum was in her 80s, and she said she wants to create a square so that, because she never spoke about his death. She'd acknowledged it and told people he died when he died, but she didn't explain the circumstances around his death, because years ago, again, it was against the law. It wasn't talked about, and as a proud mum and strong Yorkshire woman, she felt the shame and the isolation, and she felt she'd be persecuted by it. Her daughter said she felt she'd be extradited from the church. She wouldn't. So she lived with this over her all her life, and she felt that the quilt gave her an opportunity for him to be remembered forever, and that she said she could die at peace knowing that actually it was a beautiful memory for her, a memorial for her son, but it was so precious. And yeah, and we respected her anonymity. I can't say the word, but she gave her consent, and we managed it so that we could be respectful. And I think that's what we've tried to do with the quilt. We're not counsellors, and we do bring people together. Somebody once asked me what. You do your workshops. I think it was a professional. They said, "Where's your risk assessment, and how are you going to safeguard people?" And I thought, we aren't professional counsellors, but we do have that lived experience. And if we were worried about somebody, we would signpost them. But it isn't about that. The ethos around this is about the connectivity and the ability to create something in somebody's memory, but also to help and support people that may be struggling, and to give them opportunities, not just to remember their loved ones, but to signpost. Because as we know, and we've talked about it, being bereaved to suicide puts you at higher risk. And it was just such a massive and positive experience, and the connections I've made, that myself and Anna and the people that we've met along the way and that are still connected to through the quilt, is absolutely precious. And I might not see somebody for months, and then the quilt might be displayed somewhere, and I'll see somebody, and it's just that connection, and that it's so precious, and it has been, I think it's life-saving. It has helped so many people.
And Speak Their Name quilting groups have started popping up all over the country now, haven't they? I know there's at least a couple in Scotland, but it's grown even more and has moved online. Yeah. Tell us about the virtual side of Speak Their Name, and how the woolen quilt has become a virtual quilt.
Yeah, so the concept remains the same, but it is digital, and I think that this scares people a little bit. The conversations around, I think we're going to try and demystify it and try and make it as accessible to anybody that we can. Again, the concept's the same. It's a site where it's dedicated to individuals that have died to suicide, that each have their own page with a square that reflects them. Again, it isn't a picture of that individual. It is more of I've used Ian's square from the quilt for his, because it was a photo lens and he was a keen amateur photographer. Beth's has been some design that a very talented friend of artist did for me. But there's various ones, pictures of dogs, pictures of a teddy, but behind that square, like behind the quilt, is a person. And this is where I think the Speak Their Name, the website, allows us to really, really get to. I feel so honoured every time I open a page behind that square. I feel I'm being introduced to somebody. looking at pictures, reading about them and about who they were and what they liked, and watching a video. It is just, it's so precious, and it's so profoundly beautiful in that it enables that memory of that so loved and so precious person to remain alive for us. And that is so important for somebody bereaved to suicide, whether it is a family member or a close friend. This platform allows that. But alongside that as well, it allows the connection with others. It allows us to influence and support our partners in the third sector and charities by signposting. Again, it helps our decision makers, whether that be the governments or how we provide services, to look at actually. It's a different platform around suicide prevention, I believe. It's quite multifaceted in that it allows us to develop and build a beautiful page for somebody that is so unique, but also it enables that connection, that again, that you're not alone, that we are sadly in a club that nobody wants to be eligible to be in. There are no benefits to it. But if it can help others and it can support the work of our public health colleagues all around the suicide prevention, then I think it's going to make a massive change, I believe.
In doing some research for our conversation, I had a look through Ian Square, Beth Square, and many, many others on the website. And the thing that struck me was the warmth and the love. And you said it exactly there, Karen. It was like you were being introduced to these people. And they are so personal, and I think they're wonderful. They're so, in some ways, enriching, I think, about the people that are remembered there. I'm presuming because it's online, anyone can create a square about a loved one, who they've lost.
They can, and I wouldn't want people to be put off. We've got a really good supportive team that will help. It's not as hard as I think. Some of my friends who are bereaved to suicide are like, oh, I don't know if I'll be able, but they've been guided through it, and it can be what you want it to be. I think I spoke to one lady, my friend Linda, who's created a square for her son Stuart, and he's part of the Yorkshire Speak Their Name quilt, but also he's got a page on the website, on the Speak Their Name website, and she said to me, there's not enough the words that I can put in there, and I went, there never will be. There never will be. But what it will enable people is to see and know more about Stuart. And she said, that's what I want. I don't want him to be forgotten, and if it's a lasting memory, and we'll never have that pleasure of having these people that we don't know. I never met Stuart in my life, but I feel that I've been allowed a privilege, and it's been it's something that I really, really feel really honoured, that I feel that to meet individuals that are so dearly loved and so missed every single day.
If anyone wants to find out more about Speak Their Name or create a memorial square for a friend or family member, the website is speaktheirname.org, and there's a link in the show notes to this episode of Speaking of Suicide. And Karen, thank you very much for your openness with me today and your honesty with us for talking on the podcast today as well.
No, thank you. And I think like the clear messages are there is hope. It can be really dark and it can be really, really difficult, but by talking and reaching out and connecting with people, it's invaluable for all our futures.
Thank you, Karen. Here's Shona from Mikey's Line with a few thoughts to take away from our conversation today.
Something that stands out for me in Karen's story is how she shared that she later on learned that by being bereaved by suicide puts you at an increased risk of suicide. And I think it is important for us to acknowledge that the research overwhelmingly does support this conclusion, that if we are bereaved by suicide, we are at higher risk. And furthermore, it shows that we are at risk of other mental health struggles, including depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. And the research also shows that that risk is in the highest in the first year of bereavement. And there's limitations. The studies are predominantly on parents, siblings and children of the person that's died by suicide, and may underrepresent friends and co-workers. We don't understand that well enough yet. And also cultural and social contexts might influence the bereaving and vary across different groups. By knowing this, I believe it doesn't have to scare us if we have been bereaved by suicide, but rather, I believe knowledge is power. And if we know we're a little bit more at risk, then we can do more to protect ourselves. We talk about risk factors and we talk about protective factors regarding our suicide risk. And Karen beautifully gives examples of how she worked to protect herself following the loss of her partner and her daughter. She talks about particularly finding it helpful to be in support groups and peer support groups and feeling heard and feeling understood. And she also beautifully, through the work that she does, through Speak Their Name, she remembers Ian and Beth through their squares on the website. So yeah, if you're listening to this, there's a high chance that you have been bereaved by suicide. And I would really encourage and invite you to think about what might connect for you. Maybe peer support groups aren't quite right for you. One of the really helpful things I found through the Speak Your Name website was they have a wonderful resource page with all sorts of resources, including groups, including counselling and how to even access that for free, advice, training. So yeah, please, as Karen said at the end there is hope. Let's talk, let's reach out. So I really extend that invitation to you if you're listening to this. Thank you.
A huge thanks to Shona and all the team at Mikey's Line for the work they do. And don't forget, if you need someone to talk to or some help, then you can text Mikey's Line on 07786 207755 or contact them via Messenger, web chat and WhatsApp. And the number for WhatsApp is 01463 729 000. Or you can go and visit them at the Hive, 4 Struthers Lane, Inverness, where they're open 7 days a week from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And all those details and links are in the show notes. This episode of Speaking of Suicide was sponsored by McDonald's in the Community, and the platform is sponsored by Highland-based family firm D&D Paving Limited. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Speaking of Suicide is produced by Adventurous Audio Limited.